I'm sorry, but we don't just hand out large sums of money to anyone who walks in, Margot Hayes said, her tone razor-sharp with condescension. She pushed the withdrawal slip back across the polished marble counter. Especially not amounts like this. The words sliced through the air of the Lincoln Plaza branch of Sterling United Bank, echoing off the high ceilings and gilded walls. The morning bustle froze. A cluster of employees nearby exchanged smirks. One woman leaned toward her colleague and muttered just loud enough to be heard, "Yeah, right, like she's got that kind of money." Soft chuckles followed. Behind the counter, Celeste Langston stood composed, her shoulders square, her chin raised. To onlookers, she looked like any ordinary woman. Natural hair styled in a simple twist, a navy hoodie zipped up to her collarbone, and a non-designer purse hanging off her shoulder. What they didn't know would shatter their perception and their careers. Because Celeste Langston wasn't just any customer. She was the CEO of Sterling United Bank. Have you ever been judged before someone even knew your name? This story is not just about mistaken identity. It's about a system, a culture, and what happens when one powerful woman decides to challenge both. If you believe everyone deserves fair treatment, type "respect first" in the comments and hit that subscribe button. 25 years earlier, Celeste stood behind a bank counter of a different kind, then just a teller trainee wearing a crisp blue uniform and a hopeful smile. No connections, no Ivy League background, just grit, intellect, and relentless work ethic. From teller to loan officer, from assistant manager to district director. Every title she held, she earned. Every metric she hit, she shattered. While earning her MBA from Columbia, Celeste turned 3 underperforming branches around in a single fiscal year. 5 years ago, she became COO, and just 3 months prior, after a bitterly split vote, she had been named the first Black woman to lead Sterling United. Her acceptance speech had been gracious, but direct. Every client and every employee will be treated with equal respect and excellence, no exceptions. But behind the scenes, Celeste had begun uncovering patterns buried in the data. Formal complaints were low, but exit interviews revealed a troubling trend. Customers of color were quietly leaving. They weren't being mistreated loudly. They were being dismissed quietly. So Celeste did what great leaders do. She got on the ground, incognito, alone, and ready to face the truth. Tuesday morning, 9:15 a.m., Lincoln Plaza branch. She entered through the revolving doors, dressed plainly. No entourage, no security. Her demeanor casual, observant. She took a seat in the waiting area, phone in hand, pretending to scroll but watching. What she saw was stunning. A white man in a designer suit hadn't even reached the counter before a staffer opened the door and greeted him. "Good morning, sir. How can we help you today?" He was whisked to a private desk. No ID asked. An elderly Asian couple was directed to take a number, with no smile, no warmth. A young white woman in gym clothes received friendly chatter from the teller. Fun weekend plans? Transaction done in 90 seconds. Next, a Hispanic man in work boots stepped up. The mood shifted. Multiple IDs were requested. The teller squinted at his check. The whole process dragged nearly 10 minutes. This same pattern repeated again and again. At minute 37, Celeste approached the counter. 3 white customers had arrived after her, and all had been served already. The teller, a young woman with nervous energy named Emily, blinked twice when she saw the withdrawal amount. "How can I help you?" she asked flatly. Her earlier warmth vanished. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," Celeste said calmly, sliding over her bank card ID and slip. The number, 115,000. Emily's eyes darted across the documents, then to Celeste's face. She froze. "This is a large amount." "Yes," Celeste replied evenly, "but it's within my daily limit." Emily turned to the senior teller next to her, Tyler, and whispered. He nodded. Seconds later, he approached, positioning himself behind Emily, arms crossed. "Is there a problem here?" he said loudly, not to his employee, but to Celeste. The lobby went quiet. An older woman clutched her purse tighter. Celeste kept her tone steady. "No problem. Just withdrawing from my own account." Tyler picked up her ID. "We've had suspicious activity on these kinds of accounts lately," he said, emphasizing these kinds. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "What kinds?" No answer. He waved over a third staffer, Greg, who leaned in and muttered, "Bet she's laundering, or one of those cash scammers." Greg looked her up and down, smirking. We just need to verify the funds are really yours. The humiliation was calculated, yet Celeste didn't flinch. I've provided all identification. I've banked here for years. Please complete my transaction. And then Margot Hayes entered the scene. The branch manager, polished, confident, oblivious. Ma'am, she began. No name, no introduction. This is an unusually large request. May I ask what the money's for? The question hadn't been asked of a single white customer earlier that day. Celeste didn't blink. You may not. I'm accessing my own money. Margot smiled tightly. We reserve the right to deny suspicious activity. And frankly, this amount doesn't align with someone like you. There it was, no pretense, no subtlety, just pure corporate-wrapped prejudice. And they had no idea they were speaking to their own CEO. Margot Hayes didn't flinch. Her manicured hands tapped the counter lightly as she waited for Celeste to justify herself. But Celeste Langston wasn't here to justify anything. She looked her square in the eyes. I've met all verification requirements. I'm a customer. I'm requesting a legal withdrawal. I'd like to complete my transaction. Margot's smile turned thin. Again, this branch serves a certain clientele. If you'd be more comfortable at the check cashing place 2 blocks down, I'm sure they're equipped to handle your needs. The words stung not for their content, but for their clarity. This wasn't about bank policy. It was about perception. And in Margot's mind, Celeste didn't belong. Across the counter, Emily's hands trembled slightly as she shuffled deposit slips that didn't need shuffling. Her eyes avoided everyone. Tyler stood behind her with arms crossed, a wall of compliance. Greg leaned casually, chewing his gum, watching Celeste like she was some inconvenient obstacle to be cleared. Or, Greg said loudly, his tone dripping with sarcasm, maybe it's an inheritance, or a settlement, or maybe you hit the lottery. A few snickers bubbled up behind the counters. An older black man standing in line nearby adjusted his postal worker uniform and sighed, a weary sound of a man who had seen this too many times. And then Celeste reached into her purse. She pulled out her phone and calmly said, "Excuse me while I make a call." Greg and Tyler shared a smirk. Greg nudged Tyler and whispered, "What's she gonna do? Call an ASP?" Celeste ignored them. Her voice shifted into full executive mode, measured, professional, calm. "Veronica, it's Celeste Langston. I need you at the Lincoln Plaza branch." "Yes, immediately." Greg mimicked her posture, exaggerating. "This is Celeste Langston calling." "Ooh, fancy." He chuckled, clearly thinking the show of bravado was harmless fun. Margot, however, stiffened slightly. Veronica Ward was not a name you dropped lightly. She was the second most powerful woman at Sterling United, and one of Celeste's closest allies. Still, Margot brushed it off. "Ma'am," she said coldly, "I'm going to have to ask you to take your business elsewhere. You're causing a scene." Celeste didn't even turn. "No, I'm correcting one." Margot's voice sharpened. "If you refuse to leave, we'll be forced to contact security." Celeste's response? "Please do." It was 10:17 a.m. The wall clock above the main entrance ticked, marking the moment that would be cited in multiple disciplinary documents and legal reviews later that week. Margot gestured to Tyler. "Call security." A few feet away, Emily looked pale now, her fingers stilling on the keyboard. She glanced at Celeste, then back down, guilt creeping over her face. Across the bank, whispers stirred among customers. Some stared. Others awkwardly turned away. But no one interrupted. Then came the moment that flipped everything. As Margot waited for the security guard, she watched Celeste dial again. This time, the voice on the other end could be heard through the speaker. "Celeste, what's going on?" "They've denied my withdrawal, and now they're threatening to call security," Celeste said flatly. There was a pause, then, "We're on our way." Upstairs in the Sterling United Executive Suite, Veronica Ward stood bolt upright. The weight of the moment hit immediately. "Get me everything on the Lincoln Plaza branch now," she barked. Customer service logs, complaint reports, exit interviews, all of it. Down the hallway, security analysts pulled up surveillance footage, cycling through every camera angle in the branch lobby. One screen showed Celeste standing tall, unfazed, surrounded by staff who looked either smug, amused, or indifferent. A second screen showed Margot's face and the smug satisfaction behind her customer service expression. "Enhance audio," Veronica ordered. and call legal. Minutes later, the chairman of the board, Gerald Maxwell, entered the room. His eyes locked on the screen. That's Celeste, he said, stunned. The director of security nodded grimly. Yes, sir. And this has been going on for 17 minutes. A tense silence fell over the room as the audio feed caught Margot's voice from the lobby. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the check cashing place down the street. Gerald's jaw tightened. Record everything, he ordered, and call an emergency session. Meanwhile, back at the branch, security guard Thomas approached the counter. Early 20s, new to the job, and visibly uncomfortable. Margot snapped at him. Escort this woman out of the building. Thomas hesitated. He looked at Celeste, then back at his manager. Ma'am, has she broken any rules? She's being disruptive. Celeste calmly replied, I've provided full identification and met all requirements. I'm attempting a legal transaction. Thomas scratched the back of his neck, unsure. I think we should wait. Margot turned red. This is a private institution. We reserve the right to refuse service. Celeste didn't back down. Under federal banking regulations, I have a legal right to access my funds unless a legitimate fraud alert exists, which you haven't cited. Your refusal is unlawful. That's when Greg barked, Oh, come on, this is a fraud situation and we all know it. Customers gasped, some audibly, others simply watched, phones now out, quietly recording. Across the lobby, someone whispered, That's going viral. Celeste raised her phone again, calmly aiming the camera toward Margot. Just documenting this interaction in accordance with your own customer protection policy. Section 4.3. Margot's face twisted in anger. Greg muttered under his breath, These people always pulling stunts. Celeste caught it. So did the camera, the words, the tone, the dismissiveness. It was all being recorded. And just as tensions reached a boiling point, the elevator dinged, a distant chime, then a change in pressure. A hush swept through the lobby, and the double doors to the Lincoln Plaza branch flung open. Veronica Ward walked in, not just with presence, but with authority that cracked the air like thunder. Stop this, now. The doors slammed shut behind Veronica Ward as she strode into the Lincoln Plaza branch like a force of nature, heels echoing sharply across the marble floor. Her navy power suit cut a sleek silhouette against the backdrop of stunned customers and speechless employees. Stop this, now, she repeated, voice slicing through the frozen silence. Margot Hayes blinked, disoriented. Miss Ward? She stammered, tone suddenly respectful, posture straightening. What a surprise. Veronica didn't respond to the pleasantry, her eyes locked on Celeste Langston, whose face remained calm, unreadable. Veronica's voice softened just slightly. Are you all right? Celeste nodded once. I am. Then Veronica turned to the rest of the staff, her face tightening like a fist. Does anyone here know who this woman is? An uncomfortable shuffle rippled through the group. Greg's smirk had evaporated. Tyler's arms dropped to his sides. Emily looked like she might cry. Margot squinted. She said her name is Celeste Langston. Veronica nodded slowly as if daring her to keep speaking. Celeste Langston, Veronica said, voice rising just enough to carry across the entire branch, is the president and chief executive officer of Sterling United Bank. The air was yanked from the room, a collective intake of breath. Margot's lips parted, but no sound emerged. The color drained from her cheeks. She took a half step back, bumping into the corner of the counter. Greg visibly recoiled. Tyler's jaw slackened. Emily covered her mouth with both hands. One customer muttered, Oh my God, while another whispered, She's the CEO. Veronica continued, Yes, and what I just witnessed, along with everyone else, is a textbook case of racial profiling, professional misconduct, and violation of federal banking policy. Margot's voice cracked. This is a misunderstanding. No, Celeste said, her voice as steady as stone. It's a pattern. Veronica held up her tablet, and the screen lit up with live camera feeds multiple angles from the lobby. This is your surveillance system, she announced, spinning the tablet for all to see. And this footage has been live streamed to the executive security suite upstairs for the past 20 minutes. Our board of directors is watching right now. The doors opened again. This time, the atmosphere turned icy. Three people walked in dressed in executive attire, their presence unmistakable. Gerald Maxwell, chairman of the board, Linda Chen, head of compliance, and Dennis Whitehill, chief risk officer. No one had to announce their names. Their faces were familiar, seen on investor calls, internal webinars, and framed photos in the headquarters lobby. Customers and staff alike fell into stunned silence. Gerald approached, his silver hair immaculately parted, face carved in stone. He extended his hand to Celeste. "Ms. Langston, I'm so sorry this happened." Celeste accepted the handshake with grace. "Thank you, Gerald." Then his gaze hardened as he turned to Margot. "We've been reviewing every second of this morning. And frankly, I'm disgusted." Margot's voice was barely audible. I didn't know who she was." "And that's the problem," Celeste said calmly, "because I shouldn't have to be your CEO to receive basic respect." Gerald nodded solemnly. "Agreed." Veronica lifted her tablet again, scrolling quickly. "This is not an isolated event. This branch has the highest minority account rejection rate in the region. Loan denials are triple the system average for Black and Latino applicants. And exit interviews cite feeling unwelcome at rates 5 times higher than other locations." She turned to Margot. "How do you explain that?" Margot's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. "We're also reviewing your internal emails," Linda Chen added, her voice razor sharp. "There are multiple flagged messages between you and your senior staff. Inappropriate jokes, client nicknames, internal slang like lotto ladies and check cashers. You created a culture of contempt." Greg flinched. Tyler's eyes darted around for an escape. Veronica's tone became surgical. "Greg, Tyler, your mocking behavior toward a client, your assumptions based solely on race, your failure to follow protocol, this isn't just inappropriate, it's grounds for termination." Margot tried one last defense. "I was trying to protect the bank. Large cash withdrawals are risky and—" "Stop," Celeste said quietly, but with finality. "That's not what this was about. Your team processed 3 six-figure withdrawals this morning without issue, all from white clients." Veronica turned to the customers. "I want to be absolutely clear to everyone in this branch. Sterling United does not tolerate discrimination in any form. And today, we will prove that with action, not words." Gerald nodded at Celeste. She stepped forward, eyes steady, voice resolute. "Margot Hayes, Greg Mills, Tyler Becker, you are hereby terminated, effective immediately. You have failed to uphold the values of this institution. No yelling, no theatrics, just leadership." A beat passed before security guard Thomas approached. "Ma'am," he asked Celeste softly. She nodded once. "Please escort them to collect their belongings. Ensure they leave the premises respectfully." Thomas straightened his back and led the 3 shell-shocked employees toward the back hallway. Greg looked devastated. Tyler wouldn't meet anyone's gaze. Margot stopped just short of the exit, tears in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this. I've worked here 15 years. Celeste's expression didn't harden, but it didn't soften either. "Then you should have known better." The marble floors still echoed with the retreating footsteps of the 3 terminated employees. The entire Lincoln Plaza branch stood frozen, as if time had paused. Behind the teller counter, Emily stood trembling, cheeks flushed, eyes glassy with tears. She looked like she might collapse under the weight of what had just happened. Everyone else had been called out, but she was still standing there, still part of this story. Celeste Langston turned and slowly walked toward her. Emily flinched, but Celeste's face didn't show fury or disgust. Instead, she offered something far more surprising, a look of measured understanding. "What's your name?" she asked gently. Emily," the young teller stammered. "Emily," Celeste repeated softly. "You were the one who took my transaction." Emily nodded, eyes wide. I followed procedure, I swear. The moment I saw the amount, I flagged it like I was trained to do." Celeste nodded. "Yes, and that part was appropriate. But what came next, your silence during what unfolded, the comments from your colleagues, the way you looked down and said nothing. What do you think that communicated?" Emily's lip trembled. that I was afraid, that maybe I agreed with them. Did you? Celeste asked. No, she said quickly. I didn't, but I was scared. Margot ran this place like a kingdom. People who spoke up didn't last, and I'm just a teller. Celeste paused, letting the moment breathe. Do you want to be more than that? Emily blinked. What? Do you want to help fix what was broken here? Celeste asked again, more firmly now. Emily nodded slowly. Yes, I do. Celeste stepped back and addressed the entire staff, who had gathered into a hesitant half-circle, trying to figure out whether they were still employed or simply next. What happened today is not just about 3 people being terminated, Celeste began. It's about a culture that allowed those people to believe what they did was normal, acceptable, even necessary. The staff stood silently. Some couldn't meet her eyes. Others looked down in shame. But cultures can change, she continued, and leadership is how we begin. She turned back to Emily. Effective immediately, you are being promoted to interim branch manager of the Lincoln Plaza branch. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. A stunned gasp from the staff. Emily stepped back. Wait, I'm not ready. You are, Celeste cut in gently, because you felt something was wrong, even if you didn't yet have the confidence to speak up. That awareness, that discomfort, is the beginning of integrity, and it's rare. Veronica Ward smiled quietly behind Celeste, nodding in agreement. You'll have mentorship, Celeste added. You'll go through training. You'll shadow top-performing managers in our network. But more than anything, you'll have an opportunity to shape this place into what it was always meant to be. Emily looked around at her stunned coworkers. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me, Celeste replied. Just lead with courage. A few feet away, Thomas, the security guard, stood near the exit, still looking shaken. Celeste turned to him. And you? Thomas straightened. You didn't escalate, she said. You questioned your orders when something didn't feel right. That instinct? Trust it. He nodded, humbled. Yes, ma'am. Customers who had stayed to witness the entire event now began to relax. Some even clapped softly. A few approached Emily with nods of encouragement. Veronica stepped beside Celeste. We're going to have to move quickly to contain the media fallout. Then we'll move quickly, Celeste said. But we won't hide. We'll lead with the truth. 2 days later, at Sterling United headquarters, Celeste stood behind a podium emblazoned with the Sterling United crest. Cameras lined the back of the conference hall. Media badges from national outlets swung around necks. This was no routine press update. It was a reckoning. 3 days ago, Celeste began, I walked into one of our flagship branches as a regular customer. And I was judged, dismissed, and denied based solely on my appearance. She paused. Let the weight of that settle. Some will ask why a CEO would do this. The answer is simple, because data only tells part of the story. Culture lives in the in-between moments, in the raised eyebrows, in the unwritten policies, in the assumptions. Flanking her were Gerald Maxwell, Linda Chen, and Veronica Ward, the board's united front. Behind them sat former customers from underrepresented communities who had experienced discrimination in silence for years. Today, Sterling United is launching a $50 million initiative, the Fair Banking Transformation Program. This includes mandatory anti-bias training, transparent performance audits, internal whistleblower protections, and the creation of a client equity advisory board composed of community voices. The room buzzed. Reporters typed furiously. Camera shutters clicked. Celeste gestured to the group behind her. These individuals here today, small business owners, retirees, community leaders, have all experienced the subtle and not so subtle ways banks have failed them. Their insights will now shape our policies. A reporter raised his hand. Ms. Langston, are you worried this transparency will hurt the bank's reputation? No, she answered without hesitation. Because owning our failures is the first step to real leadership. And if we lose customers who prefer the old way, then we'll know they were never aligned with our values to begin with. She stepped away from the podium to a standing ovation. The branch had undergone rapid change. Discriminatory language was gone. Biased practices audited. Customer flow reorganized. And at the heart of it all a 26-year-old teller-turned-manager named Emily was doing her best, awkwardly but earnestly working to lead the team she used to fear. 1 week after the incident, Celeste returned again unannounced, this time not to test, but to witness. She watched from a quiet corner as an elderly black couple was greeted with warmth. A young Latino contractor was offered a financial consultation instead of being rushed out. The vibe had shifted. As she left the branch, Emily spotted her and ran over. "Ms. Langston, wait," Celeste smiled. "Yes? I just wanted to say I'm not perfect. I still get nervous. I still worry I'm going to mess up." "Good," Celeste said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "That means you care. And that's exactly the kind of person who deserves to lead." 3 days after Celeste Langston's press conference, the story was everywhere. Headlines dominated national media outlets. Bank CEO goes undercover, exposes racial bias at her own branch. From humiliation to leadership, Celeste Langston sparks financial reckoning. Undercover justice, Sterling United sets $50 reform into motion. Clips of the incident captured both by surveillance footage and customer cell phones circulated across platforms. Millions watched as the CEO of a major bank was denied her own money, only to reveal her identity and change everything. On social media, hashtags trended globally. Undercover CEO, Celeste Langston, #fair banking, now #respect first. People weren't just watching, they were engaging. Thousands shared their own stories of banking bias, of being questioned, doubted, dismissed. What Celeste had endured wasn't unique. What was unique was how she responded. Inside Sterling United headquarters, the ripple effects moved fast and deep. New training programs were launched overnight. Hiring policies were reviewed by civil rights consultants. Every branch's service metrics were broken down by race, age, gender, and income bracket. Celeste made it clear, this wasn't about diversity optics. It was about performance. Bonuses for managers were no longer tied only to profits. They were now also linked to customer equity scores, staff retention by demographic, and complaint resolution times. No more turning a blind eye. Veronica Ward, now heading the Internal Reform Task Force, summed it up in one line during a leadership meeting. Equality is not a slogan, it's a measurable standard. Outside the bank, business leaders began to take note. At a global finance summit in Chicago, Celeste delivered the keynote address to a packed auditorium. Instead of showing charts and forecasts, she played 90 seconds of lobby footage from the Lincoln Plaza branch, the moment Margot Hayes dismissed her, just before the big reveal. The audience was silent. Then Celeste stepped to the mic. "If this can happen to me, your peer, a fellow executive, imagine what's happening to the people who don't have my title." A standing ovation followed, but the applause wasn't for the moment. It was for the message that corporate power must be used to protect, not just perform. In Congress, the story triggered bipartisan interest. Lawmakers requested transcripts from the press conference. One senator from Ohio cited Sterling United's reform as a model during a committee hearing on consumer protection. And advocacy groups that had long lobbied for fair lending practices found themselves with a powerful new ally. Celeste didn't retreat after the incident. She leaned in harder. She joined closed-door meetings with federal banking regulators. She helped draft a white paper on equity and consumer banking. She invited community leaders to advisory meetings and listened. And she made every word of her company's mission mean something. Back at the Lincoln Plaza branch, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The lobby now featured a prominent sign: all customers deserve dignity, respect, and equal service. If your experience doesn't reflect these values, call this number. Below was Celeste Langston's direct office line. Staff meetings began with 5-minute reflections, brief exercises where team members shared lessons, customer wins, or moments they wished they'd handled better. A new culture was forming, one where silence wasn't safety and speaking up wasn't punishment. Emily, now the full-time branch manager, had made it her mission to rebuild trust. She held open office hours weekly for team feedback. She installed a bias flag button in the teller system where staff could discreetly flag a situation for review if they felt uncomfortable or unsure. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. For Celeste, it wasn't just about cleaning house. It was about laying a new foundation. One Friday evening, as the sun dipped low over the city skyline, She stood alone in her office overlooking the headquarters atrium. She held in her hand the same modest leather purse she'd carried the day she walked into Lincoln Plaza, a gift from her old team, worn but sturdy. She set it down on her desk and whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "That woman still walks into banks every day. Now she won't be invisible." Veronica knocked gently on the door and stepped inside. "We just got the quarterly report." "How bad is it?" Celeste asked. Veronica smiled. "It's not bad, it's real. Complaints are up because people finally trust us enough to speak. And guess what? Service disparities have dropped 28% in 4 weeks." Celeste allowed herself a rare smile. "Good, let's keep going. Keep." A few weeks later, Celeste visited a rural branch unannounced. No cameras, no board members. Just her, dressed in jeans and a sweater. An older white teller greeted her warmly, offered her a water, and invited her to speak with a loan advisor. No hesitation, no side glances, no questions about the legitimacy of her request. As she sat across from the advisor, a young black woman named Nadine, Celeste introduced herself casually. "I'm Celeste." Nadine smiled back. "It's nice to meet you." No recognition, just respect. And for Celeste Langston, that was enough. 6 months had passed since the day Celeste Langston was publicly humiliated, only to rise, reveal, and reform the institution she led. But the ripples of that moment hadn't slowed. They'd only grown stronger. Sterling United's transformation was no longer just internal. It was national. The Fair Banking Transformation Program had expanded into something bigger, a living movement. Every branch, from rural outposts in Alabama to skyscrapers in New York City, now operated under new protocols of equity. Every employee from top to bottom had undergone mandatory anti-bias and cultural competency training. But it didn't stop at training. Real structural changes were visible. All teller systems were updated with built-in audit triggers for potential bias. Branch layouts were redesigned to ensure equal accessibility for all clients. And hiring panels now required diverse representation. Customer satisfaction was no longer measured by generic numbers, but by cross-demographic parity. Each branch was assigned an equity officer, a rotating position held by staff who volunteered to serve as peer advocates. And those equity officers had one standing monthly call with Celeste herself. "You don't fix culture from the top," but she told them during their first virtual meeting. "You fix it shoulder to shoulder, floor by floor." In downtown Atlanta, a formerly underserved community celebrated the grand reopening of its local Sterling United branch. Banners fluttered across the street that read, "A bank that sees you, finally." Speaking at the ribbon cutting, Celeste stood beside 11-year-old Maya Cooper, whose lemonade stand profits had been rejected by another bank for being too minor. This time, Maya had a Sterling account and a mentor from the community to help her manage her savings. Celeste crouched beside her during the ceremony and whispered, "I see a CEO in you already." In Oakland, California, Sterling partnered with local nonprofits to provide financial literacy classes to low-income families and formerly incarcerated individuals. In St. Louis, they opened their first mobile banking unit, a traveling branch that brought access to rural and neglected areas. And in Harlem, a scholarship fund was launched in Celeste's name to support first-generation college students studying finance, business, or law. Each program wasn't just a public relations move. They were direct responses to the failings exposed that day at Lincoln Plaza. But not everyone had forgotten that moment. Margot Hayes, now 6 months removed from her termination, had resurfaced in news cycles, interviewed by niche outlets and podcasts trying to stir controversy. "I was publicly humiliated," she told one interviewer. "I didn't deserve to be made an example." Celeste never responded. She didn't need to, because the real story wasn't about revenge, it was about repair. Back in headquarters, Celeste started something new, a private mentoring circle for mid-level employees who had shown strong potential but lacked institutional support. Emily, once a terrified teller, was among them. "I don't know why you picked me," she admitted during their first session. "Because you saw the line," Celeste said, "and you hated it, even if you didn't know how to cross it yet." That's leadership. Emily now managed not only Lincoln Plaza, but mentored 3 junior branch managers in neighboring cities. "Sometimes I still feel like that scared girl," she confessed once during a staff retreat. "Good," Celeste said. "It means you remember what fear looks like." which means you'll never be the person others are afraid of. Sterling's internal newsletter, once dry and filled with investment graphs, now featured a recurring column: ground-level voices, stories from security guards, tellers, customer service reps, all sharing moments where they made someone feel seen, where they caught themselves slipping into assumption and corrected it. Celeste's favorite entry came from a 59-year-old janitor in Omaha, who wrote, I was cleaning the ATM area when a woman told me she'd lost her debit card. She looked nervous. I told her to go inside and ask for Maria. I didn't assume she was homeless. I assumed she was human. That story made it to Celeste's wall. Forbes named her Executive of the Year. Fortune listed Sterling United as one of the most trusted companies in America. A documentary team began following her journey to capture how one moment sparked systemic change. But through it all, Celeste stayed grounded. One evening during a talk at a historically Black university, a student asked, "How do you keep from becoming the very thing you stood against?" Celeste paused, then said softly, "By remembering that power isn't a mirror, it's a window, and I never want mine to block the view of who's still waiting outside." On the one-year anniversary of the incident, Sterling hosted a global virtual summit titled From Moment to Movement, Transforming Institutions from the Inside. Hundreds of companies joined, CEOs logged in, banks, tech giants, nonprofits. And at the heart of the summit, Celeste didn't talk about policies or profits. She talked about that moment, at the counter, when she was told she didn't belong. And how, instead of walking out, she chose to stand still, because silence keeps systems alive. And her silence ended that day. A year to the day after the Lincoln Plaza incident, Celeste Langston found herself standing in front of the very same branch. It looked different now. Gone were the heavy marble counters that had created distance between teller and client, replaced instead with open design desks, natural light, and soft seating. A wall that once held generic posters now featured portraits of community members who banked there. Real faces, real stories. Celeste stepped through the doors, not in disguise, not undercover, but as herself. Emily was waiting, wearing a tailored blazer and a calm confidence that had taken root in her over the past 12 months. "You came," she smiled. "I wouldn't miss it." Today marked not just the one-year anniversary, but also the official relaunch of Sterling United's inclusive banking initiative across all 50 states. The ceremony was small by design, no press, no cameras, just a handful of employees, community leaders, and longtime customers. As Celeste stood by the podium, she watched the staff interact. A young Hispanic man received help setting up a business account. A Black grandmother and her grandson were shown financial planning tools by a patient loan officer. An elderly Vietnamese couple sat with a bilingual advisor. It was working, not perfectly, not everywhere, but it was working. When she was handed the mic, she didn't read from notes, she just spoke. "A year ago, I was told right here in this lobby that someone like me didn't fit the image of this bank. A year ago, the assumptions about my appearance almost cost this institution everything it claimed to stand for. But what happened next, what you all helped make happen, wasn't just justice, it was transformation." She paused. "We cannot undo every moment of bias or disrespect in the world, but we can lead. We can show what it means to listen, to change, and to rise. This is not my legacy, it's ours." The applause was warm, not thunderous, not dramatic, just sincere. After the event, Celeste walked quietly back to the sidewalk and looked up at the building. Sterling United. A bank she had once built from the inside, a place where she had once been told she didn't belong, and now a place forever changed by her decision to stand still and speak. Weeks later, inside the executive suite, Celeste met with the board for a routine quarterly review. Performance metrics were up, customer satisfaction was at record highs, employee turnover had dropped. But Celeste had something else to say. "It's time." The room quieted. "Time for what?" Gerald Maxwell asked. "For me to step down." Shock moved across their faces. "I've done what I came here to do," she said. "The systems are in place. The leaders are in place. And the next chapter doesn't need to be mine. It needs to be led by someone who carries this vision forward with fresh eyes and unwavering purpose." Veronica Ward looked over, eyes shimmering. "Have you chosen someone?" Celeste smiled. "Yes, and she's already been doing the work." 3 months later, at the National Leadership Forum in Washington, D.C., the announcement became official. Emily Banks, once a timid teller, now a fierce advocate for equitable service, was named the new Chief Operating Officer of Sterling United. As she took the stage to accept, she looked to the front row where Celeste sat in quiet pride. I once stood behind a counter, terrified to speak up. Now, I stand here because someone showed me that silence isn't strength. Integrity is. The crowd rose to their feet. As for Celeste, she didn't vanish. She went on to found the Langston Institute for Ethical Leadership, a nonprofit dedicated to mentoring young women of color in business and finance. She traveled, spoke, wrote, and listened. But most days you could find her walking into banks across America, not to inspect, but to observe. Always in plain clothes, always with her same worn leather purse, still watching, still believing, still making sure that the next time a woman walks up to a counter with confidence in her stride and dignity in her voice, no one dares question whether she belongs.